What up, y'all? It's T-Tar, and today we're talking about Zygarde getting some kind of new form in Pokemon Legends. Yeah, you see, with this big game coming out, the chances are Zygarde would come out of it with some development, like a new form. The same way we came out of Legends Arceus with 2 new Dialga Palkia forms, right? But the weird thing about this is Game Freak kind of spilled all their beans about Zygarde early, because they didn't know. They thought they were just scrapping Pokemon Z for good, so they gave all the beans in Sun and Moon. They showed its 10% form, 100% form. Clearly, you could see they had some plans they were cooking up, and for some reason, instead of scrapping it, they're like, you know what? We've already went too far developing them. Just put them in Sun and Moon as some kind of bonus stuff. Which makes you wonder, what were they planning? Like, for you to be able to meet 10% Zygarde roaming around early in Pokemon Z? Maybe you're running into it as it was checking out places of interest that might be under threat, leading up to meeting 50% Zygarde early in the game, and then you'd see 100% at the climax. And remember, whatever Pokemon Z or the scrap games could have been, they don't necessarily have to be the sister game like the actual Pokemon Z. They could have actually been sequels and continuing from the moment Lysander fired that weapon, which is crazy. And it also makes sense because like X and Y, it just straight up ended after the main story, right? So especially after they just got finished with Black and White, it makes sense. It was not going to be the Pokemon Crystal or Emerald, but actually like another Black 2 and White 2. But anyhow, we have Pokemon Legends EA coming out, and we know everything about Zygarde, and Game Freak's gonna want to impress us about something involving Zygarde. So this is where this theory starts from. Zygarde might get a new form in Pokemon Legends EA, which I'm gonna dub the 200% form. Yeah, the point is, the name is not supposed to make sense. And the second part of this idea comes from the weird theory I put out where Zygarde is actually an artificial man-made Pokemon and not actually a trio with Xerneas and Yveltal. It's just Xerneas and Yveltal, and then you have this other Pokemon that was made in a lab. There's nothing really in-game that suggests this, so this theory is a bit far out, but you gotta look at Zygarde and think it's so cell-based. While it is possible a Pokemon naturally could be the way Zygarde is, it makes so much more sense that it was artificially made to be that, and that's why you can form these clumps of cells to form a dog, and then the serpent, and then this giant especially the Optimus Prime, man. You telling me naturally? That looks like a human's vision for making the ultimate Pokemon, Judgment Pokemon, that would stop something. A humanoid form. Tell me Zygarde does not look humanoid. I'm dying on this hill. Zygarde is an artificial Pokemon. So that's where this theory is actually continuation of. The idea that Zygarde is an artificial Pokemon and not a member of X and Y. You know, Xerneas and Yveltal is a trio. It's its own thing and overall would be considered in the trio, but it's its own thing. So how could this perfect Zygarde that was made in a lab, how can we give this thing something like a 200% form? And it goes something like this. You see, I said that Zygarde was made in a lab, right? Well, if you talk to Zygarde in game, it plays Xerneas and Yveltal's theme. It's also, of course, completing the trio of X, Y, and Z. So my idea is, it was made using parts of Xerneas and Yveltal. And you know what, we might as well connect this to the other theory I made, which is that 3,000 years ago, the war in Kalos was within itself. It was the organic side versus the synthetic side, right? We've talked about this. The synthetic side's ultimate creation was Zygarde. The organic side, maybe they had Xerneas and Yveltal on their side, maybe not. But either way, Zygarde was made to counter Xerneas and Yveltal, as evidenced by its very odd ability. Listen to its ability. I don't know if I've said this in the video the way I'm about to right now, but it's called Aura Break. Not Aura Reversal or Aura Suppressant, something weird like that. It's such an offensive wording for its ability. Like it was born to break Xerneas and Yveltal's abilities. So the idea behind this is, as it was made from Xerneas and Yveltal's DNA in some sense to create an ultimate creature, that not only can it reverse and like fold Xerneas and Yveltal's power on itself, but it's also compatible with Xerneas and Yveltal's power. And this is when we get to the way we can go about this new form. So it's like this. You see perfect Zygarde? We don't know what Game Freak was planning, but if you look carefully, aside from him being green and black, he has the exact colors of red and blue, and these aren't just any shades of red and blue. For some weird reason, they represent Xerneas and Yveltal. But we know how Zygarde functions. All you have to do is gather all of Zygarde's natural cells for him to take on the form. It doesn't have anything to do with Xerneas and Yveltal. So why would it be colored like that? Well, it's for the first reason I said, which is that at its core, it was made using their DNA. So when it goes into its ultimate stage, it has little remnants of that. But the other thing it could mean is, if you look at what Zygarde looks like, I don't actually have him open. Goodness, this man is a monster. So look, he has 2 blue ones and 2 red ones, as well as the pattern leaking onto even the front of his body, the blue and the red. So this is my idea, right? You can complete Zygarde further if he doesn't just suppress Xerneas and Yveltal's power, but he takes their power. So in the sense that if he was in front of a Xerneas, not only can he fold Xerneas on itself, but he can straight up absorb Xerneas and its life energy into itself. Check this out, right? It's very odd, and I don't know if Game Freak intended to be inspired by Dragon Ball Z with like Mewtwo looking like Frieza, and then this thing being pretty much Cell, especially going off this theory that it's man-made. But you know, that's the artwork I just showed you now, right? Those aren't just normal tentacles. Look at this artwork here. The tentacles open up and are little mouths. And potentially it's not just the front 2 tentacles, but all 4 that can do this. So it's almost something like it actually can just straight up devour Xerneas and Yveltal. And you may be saying, well, hold on, this is the same thing as Kyurem and Necrozma, but I think Game Freak just straight up likes the idea of absorbing other Pokemon. They wouldn't have redone it for Necrozma if they didn't. Necrozma does it a bit different than Kyurem. It's just reabsorbing light energy in general. I guess Zygarde's would be a combination of both. It's powering itself with Xerneas and Yveltal's power like Necrozma, but it's also completing itself further like Kyurem. And so it'd be like this, right? Zygarde is all around the region in cells. If it senses danger, it gathers a little clump into this 10% dog, scouts out the scene, reporting back to its main body of a 50% Zygarde that seems to always be lying somewhere. When it needs to whoop butt, it forms completely in one location into Optimus Prime, and this is 100% form. And if the opportunity ever rises, the ancient Kalosians made it so Zygarde, if it hunts down Xerneas and Yveltal and absorbs them, he becomes his 200% form. And it would be something like this, because you're like, what, 200%? There's only 100%. It'd be something like this. First off, he would not be absorbing both Xerneas and Yveltal. He would be absorbing one at a time. So if he just absorbs Xerneas, it'll trigger like Zygarde is Mega Evolving into Mega Zygarde X. And it would be a blue themed life energy order Pokemon Zygarde. But it would be a play on the Mewtwo and Charizard starts, right? It would be something like Mewtwo and Charizard got a smaller version of what was actually supposed to happen to Zygarde. Or instead of saying it Mega Evolved to give Zygarde a fresh line, it could say Zygarde transformed into its ultimate form or 200% form, right? So you have cores, 10%, 50%, 100% slash perfect Zygarde, then ultimate Zygarde slash 200% Zygarde. So what it would be doing, it would be something like it absorbs Xerneas' power and uses it to double its potential and cell size because Xerneas carries life energy. So Zygarde would be temporarily doubling its cells and power to reach what would make sense then to be called a 200% form. That's quite literally the definition, right? And then if instead of Xerneas being in the picture, Zygarde goes and hunts Yveltal, then it can Mega Evolve or transform into a different 200% Zygarde or Mega Zygarde Y, and it would be this red themed Death Order Pokemon. Something like what the ancient Kalosians wanted was something that could take life and death into its own hands and actually actively do something. So Zygarde would be a Pokemon that takes life and death's power into its own hands. And it works for Yveltal too, because here's something interesting about Xerneas and Yveltal, right? I have to make a video on this, but they're in a sense the same. You see, Xerneas has life energy that it grants, right? But Yveltal doesn't necessarily have death energy. What Yveltal does is suck people to then have life energy or life force energy. So all Xerneas and Yveltal have are the same things, just life force energy. Only Xerneas' is blue and Yveltal's is red. And I guess you could say there's a slight taint to it that makes it those colors, but they're the same thing. So Zygarde could absorb Yveltal and that life energy and temporarily double its cell count and reach this super I guess it could be called super perfect Zygarde, but that's straight up Dragon Ball. Tell me that after I've said all this, does Zygarde not look so synthetic like that's supposed to happen? And so the pattern on his stomach or his old face would be fully red or fully blue. All its hexagons would be fully red or blue as well. It would be the life and death Zygarde forms. Another way to do this is instead of him absorbing Xerneas and Yveltal, because he has the power to reverse their abilities, maybe Zygarde can straight up condense them into, cleverly, a small orb that would kind of act as a physical megastone. It would be called like the Xerneas orb and the Yveltal orb. And if Zygarde holds it, it would get the Mega Evolve symbol and function just like a normal megastone, which would also add to the mystery of what megastones are. If they originate from Xerneas and Yveltal's power in some sense, it'd be interesting if you could actually condense Xerneas and Yveltal to a very strong megastone like that. See, I've made the mathematics make sense. I've made 200% Zygarde make sense. And you gotta think, Game Freak would want to impress us with something with Zygarde in this game, right? Yeah, it could be just Xerneas and Yveltal getting new forms, but Zygarde is so hyped right now. And check this out, right? So Zygarde has, what is it, 600 BST. When it completes itself, it reaches 708 BST, one of the strongest natural Pokemon. It is really close to Arceus. And when it Mega Evolves into 200%, it would reach 808 BST, which sounds really solid. Like, that's a nice sounding number. And it would be the strongest Pokemon of all time, excluding Eternatus. You see, the current top 3 are Mega Mewtwo XY and Mega Rayquaza at 780 BST. They've pushed their BST to the limit. He would take the throne realistically at 808, and we would know Zygarde is the strongest he would beat Arceus too, is the strongest Pokemon right now. But to bring it full circle, right? It's only natural that, especially if we have a question of what happened in this Kalos or who's it against, that one side could have been something like the people who made Zygarde to actually protect what they wanted for the future of Kalos and have Zygarde make use of the life and death energy. Think about it. If in Kalos, let's say the other side won, and we're assuming this is what happened, they would be a very protected region. Zygarde would be standing alongside them with life and death powers, and they would be a very robust region. No one would pick a fight with them. And with the life energy, they could also, you know, take care of all the people. And with the death energy, they could make sure no one attacks them. It sounds like a realistic thing that would happen. But, you know, for some reason, the war happens, the ultimate weapon is launched, and the synthetic side is beaten. And so Zygarde just chills around in the region as a remnant. Something very cool would be that, you see, look at this crazy. You cannot tell me this is not man-made. I told you, I'm dying on this hill. But you imagine, right, when he absorbs either Xerneas or Yveltal, that he takes on their shapes. So, because he already has the tentacles, right? So when he absorbs Yveltal and becomes the Death Judgment Order Pokemon, he could have a more Y look. And then have a more X look for the other side. They could continue the play on X and Y. The other reason when I'm thinking about this idea that I like outcasting Z from X and Y is because X and Y have a place right now in the world, right? In terms of the chromosomes, which seems to be something of relevance because it's on the logo. It's what Mega Evolution is. So Z almost seems like something artificial, something that obviously doesn't belong in the same picture, but is being added to the picture. I suppose it's the same thing as Legends Arceus, where you'd have these followers of Xerneas or Yveltal, and depending on which side you pick, it determines what form you get to see Zygarde go into in your run of the game. Anyhow, make sure to shank that like button. Let me know your thoughts. Do you see 200% Zygarde happening? Do you see him physically absorbing Xerneas or Yveltal? Or do you see him like condensing them down to a super mega stone and then mega evolving into his X form or his Y form through that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.